there guys, I am going to do a quick video today about how to create some graphs in Excel. So I have a just sample data set here. If you're in my STA220 class, then this Excel file is what we used in class, so you can open it and kind of try it on your own. But honestly, you can type any numbers into Excel into a column and then try to make your own graph from that, just to kind of get a example of what it will look like. And then if you have some real data to use, you can put that in and kind of see what the graphs would be and how you can interpret those. So I'm going to look at first this data set here, which was presidents' ages. So these were the presidents' ages when they took office. So what we want to do is you can either just highlight the whole column by left clicking on the column there, and then it highlights everything, or you can left click on the number and hold it down and just drag it all the way down to the bottom of the numbers. Either way will work for what we're doing right now. And so when you want to put your graph in, you're going to go up here to Insert, and then we've got all these different graphs to choose from. Now because we're doing quantitative data, right, we've got numbers, then we want to use a histogram. So the histogram option that they give us is this blue graph right here. So you'll want to choose that. And when you do that, you see at the top it says histogram and then some other stuff there. So we're going to use just that top one without the line. And then we get this graph, right? So the graph that we have here might be good enough for what you're doing. You might like how it looks, but I'm going to talk about how to adjust it some, because just because Excel gave you this graph doesn't mean that it's the perfect graph or it's the one that you have to use. So we're going to talk about how to manipulate this data, or this graph, sorry, a little bit. So we did talk about in class how we typically want to stay between 5 and 12 categories for histograms, right? Because if we have too many categories, it gets really spread out and you get a lot of little bars. If you have only like 2 categories, you end up with just this narrow set where you've got really high bars. And so either way, you're not going to get a lot of description about the data. So we can see the graph that they gave us here does have 5 categories, so that's good. You know, it is between 5 and 12. But you'll also notice sometimes when they choose their own ranges for the category widths, they may be decimals or just numbers that maybe don't work for the data you have. So like here when we're talking about ages, you know, it says this is going from 42 to 48 and a half. You know, I'd probably rather it go to 48, right, instead of that half point. So we might want to change that. So let's talk about how we can change it. So what you're going to do is you're going to go up here to where the x-axis numbers are, and you're going to left click on it. And so when you left click, you should see whatever section you clicked on highlighted. So we see that that's created this box around it. And then we're going to right click, and it's going to bring up this menu, and we want to go to the Format Chart area. And I think it clicked the wrong thing. I'm sorry, let's start again. Go here and click on that. So left click here and then right click. There we go, that's better. Format Axis. So the other one was what we would use to change the graph. But the Format Axis is what we want to get to actually change maybe what the categories look like. So let's say I want to... And now I just messed it up again. So left, right, Format Axis. There we go. So let's say I want to change it from this automatic, what it's on now, to my own category widths for each of those categories. So they call their groupings bins. In Excel, they call them BIN, bins, and that is what they call their categories. Okay, so where it says bin width, that's talking about how many numbers we're going to put into each group, right? So maybe I want to do bins of 5. Okay, so when I put the 5 in, now you see that it's changed it from, now this is 42 to 47, and then 47 to 52, etc. from there. So maybe I like how that looks. Or maybe I want widths of 10. Right? Now I don't have as many categories, so that one probably isn't as good for my data. If I did something like 2, well, now that's kind of too many categories, right? But another thing you can do is you can just tell it how many categories you want. So maybe I want 8 categories. And then it's going to figure out how to create 8 categories down there. Okay, so you could adjust from there and just kind of see how does it all work out. This one looks pretty good as well because we can kind of see most of the presidents were between 50 and 58, right? And then it was kind of rare to have them over here or somewhat rare to have them down there. So this one could be good too. So you would kind of just choose which one you like the most. And so I'm pretty happy with this one, let's say. The next thing we might want to do is maybe we want to change this, because right now if I print this graph out, it's just going to say chart title at the top, right? And so I want someone to understand what this graph is showing. So if you left click on this and then click again, you'll see your cursor, and so you can delete what's in there. And maybe I say this is a histogram and it's the president's ages at or ages when taking office, something like that. Okay, and I guess I should put U.S. presidents. And you can use capital letters or whatever, make it a little more correct English-wise, but something like that, so that if somebody does pick up this graph, they'll say, oh, this is, you know, the ages of U.S. presidents when taking office, and so now I know that what a 50 is talking about, you know. So another thing you might want to do is add in titles or explanations of what the axis is showing. So to do that, if you click on the whole graph like that, this little chart tool menu comes up, and we want to do this add chart element. And so you can see here there's some different things, like if you want to change what it looks like, something there. Here's where we're going to add in our axis titles. If you lose your chart title and need to change it, you can put it back in there. If you want data labels, like you see when I do this, it shows what they would look like, and so what that does is it tells you exactly how many are in each group, right, without having to look at your y-axis. You could do grid lines if you wanted, like those. You can have a legend. For us, it doesn't really make sense because we only have one series, but if you were showing, you know, multiple things at once, you might want one. But we're going to go back to the axis titles. I want one on the x-axis, so I'm going to do that. So now it brought in that. And again, we'll just click on it. So left click and then left click again. And I'm going to say this is age in years, right? Because we could also have age in like the number of months they are or whatever, but ours is going to be age in years. If you wanted to label this, it's just going to be frequency or relative frequency, so that one I'm not as concerned with. All right, so some other things you could do. What if you want to make the graph a certain color or change something about the borders? Then what you're going to do is click on the actual graph. So now you can see I've got all these kind of have blue dots around them, and then right click and say Format Data Series. And so this is where if I go to the paint bucket there, I can change what this looks like. So maybe I want to make it purple, or maybe I want it to have some sort of pattern. Now this can be helpful if you've got multiple things you're comparing on one graph and you don't have a color printer. You know, if it's going to print off in black and white, then you may want to do something like this. So you make one that's polka dots or something like this, and then you make one that looks like something else, so that when it prints out, even if it's on black and white, it'll still work, right? So that's something you can do there. I usually like to put a border around these. So you could go to border and do a solid line, and I'm going to change mine to black there. And you can change like how wide the line is. Lots of different things you can do here, right? You could stay there probably forever, but there is my graph, which I'm pretty happy with. And so if I want to print out the graph, the easiest way to do that is just to click on the graph and then go to File, Print, and then it will just print that selected chart there. So you don't have to worry about setting up the print area or anything like that. All right. So that is how we would do a histogram. The next example I have, if you go down to the Example tab here, is questions like what you're doing for your survey project. So are you a full-time student? Let's say these were my 3 questions. Are you a full-time student? How many hours do you work in a typical week? And what degree are you working towards? So here in column A, I have question 1 answers. So these were all just going to be yes, no's for the full-time student. Question 2, for how many hours you work. Of course, those are going to be numbers. So that's going to be quantitative variable. And question 3, what degree are you working towards? That also is going to be qualitative. So you could have your data in like this, or you might have it already like this in a frequency or relative frequency chart. If you already have it like this, it actually makes it a little easier to do as a graph. If you have it this way, it's okay, but there is kind of a in-between step that you have to go through. So let's look at it this way. Okay, so I'm going to highlight my data just for question 1. And I'm going to go up here to Insert. And what you're going to notice is if you click on any of these, they're going to show you a graph that just has, you know, those yes, no's there. It doesn't really make sense, right? So I'm going to go to Recommended Charts, which is the ones, you know, they think you probably would want to see. And it gives me just this one option of the clustered column is what this one is called. So basically it's our bar graph. So I'm going to say OK. And so what it did was it opened a new sheet, and then it did what it's called a pivot table in Excel, but that's basically just a frequency table to tell me how many yeses and how many no's you had. So now I've got this graph, and it says this is a count of question 1, and I've got that many no's and that many yeses. Now once I have this, I can highlight it, and I can go up here to Insert. And I can choose now different ones if I want to. You also, I think, can click on this one in the design and change chart type and do it that way too. But if I wanted a pie chart instead, I could choose that. Okay, so maybe I like the pie chart. Okay, so let's talk about how we can change stuff here. So if I click on this, because I probably don't want it to say count of question 1, but maybe I just want to write what question I asked. So my question was, are you a full-time student? All right, and then right now it has no yes or no or anything, right? So I probably want a legend, maybe. And then I'd probably like to add data labels. You can have them however you want, so maybe like that, where it's got a little bubble around it. Okay, and so now it says yes is 68% and no is 32%. So any of the ones you chose would be fine. So now, even if it doesn't print out in color, you can see on here that it shows, you know, this is yes and that's no. So if you do have the yes and no already labeled on there, you might not need this, you know, so you could just delete it. And leave it like that. That's kind of up to you, however you want to do it. But so that would be our pie chart. But like I said, you also could do a bar graph if you would rather. So go up to the column and say OK. And now it pretty much looks the same, right? It's just has a bar graph. And so if you don't like how the labels look, you would just go back to here. And, you know, you could change it if you'd rather have it another way. All right, and so that is how you can do a pie chart, bar graph, histogram, anything that you want to do in Excel. For now, that's pretty much what we're going to be using the most of. We will see how to do some scatter plots and linear regression stuff in Chapter 4. But for now, this is the main thing you'll want to know just for setting up those graphs. So if you have any questions, be sure to let me know. You can email me at angela.galloway@kctcs.edu or stop by my office sometime, or just let me know in class and I'd be happy to kind of go over some of this with you. All right, so good luck on making your graphs and I hope to see you soon.